Seamus, a serving secondary school teacher, one of many who wrote to the Natural Women's Council, is coming forward to reveal how Ireland's classrooms are quietly being repurposed as ideological training grounds. What Seamus describes is not education, but political indoctrination through the curriculum, the culture, and staff training, all while parents are being kept in the dark. Thank you for coming forward today to do this interview. It takes courage to speak up and be that dissenting voice. We had, following the last two teacher whistleblower interviews, we had numerous emails from teachers like yourself who wrote in, who wanted this platform to share what's happening. So again, thank you for coming today. And if you can take a moment to introduce yourself.
It's Mr. Seamus Fihil, Monim in Indoctrinated CSP. You can call me Seamus Michael. I teach engineering with a little bit of CSP at the moment. Since 2001 I've been teaching in a second level school. I'm also a member of the Teachers Union of Ireland, the TUI, and I was on the executive committee from 2014 to 2016.
Great. And what is CSPE?
CSP is Civic, Social and Political Education.
Thank you. What is it that motivated you to do this interview today? What concerns do you have about what's happening behind the school gates?
I think that education is being hijacked and the schools are becoming or could potentially become breeding grounds for activists and activism. And I think that not only are there attempts being made to indoctrinate pupils, but I think that there's also attempts being made to indoctrinate teachers as well.
And can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by indoctrinating teachers as well?
Yeah, my teachers are there's a kind of a push to make teachers use things like preferred pronouns and buy into ideologies that weren't there up to maybe a few years ago. Like the NCCA, for example, and this was raised in the Dáil recently as well, and a bit further back, like, advising teachers on using preferred pronouns. There's now talk that teachers will receive anti-bias training, which would probably be sugar-coated as anti-racism training or something else. But the point is that everybody that had every opinion, everybody's entitled to form an opinion, and every opinion is a bias. So what you really, I would actually consider anti-opinion training. And other examples for example, as teachers have had outside groups come into them and do training with them, or they've been asked to do training, or maybe some cases, I don't know, made to do training. And for example, one group that has come into schools is BelongTo, where teachers were spoken to at staff meetings, and they were advised on how to use pronouns and ideology and all the rest. And also teachers were told to do online training, which I and a few teachers I know declined to do.
And BelongTo is Ireland's trans activist youth organisation meant to be supporting the LGBTQI plus youth. So they're going into schools to push training for teachers?
Yes.
And do they do anything else in the schools to push this ideology and this belief into the schools?
I'm not sure. I think they might meet with pupils occasionally as well. Schools get the Q mark we're told schools get the Q mark if, for example, all teachers do this training, but that's what they are. That's what they promote, that ideology.
And do they do any sort of celebration weeks in the school to promote this?
Yeah, every year around November or thereabouts, there's a stand-up week where there's different activities in the school. You know, depending on the school you're in, I suppose, but usually done at lunchtime or break time. I don't know whether it's done in fast time in some schools or not, but it's and for example, it usually culminates in a Friday with a non-uniform day where the students, so for example, they might get the first years to wear one colour of the flag, the second years to wear the second colour. So you might have first years in red, second years yellow, third years green, and so on. And that's what's done, and it's just basically to promote this ideology in schools. And depending on the school you're in, some schools, for example, pupils are told maybe that if they're not going to come in like that they should, that maybe just come in uniform.
So a child who doesn't want to wear one of the colours of the 6 rainbow flag colors, they have to wear their normal uniform. So it would stand out who wasn't supporting this.
Well, yeah, it depends, I suppose, on the school. Now, I mean, in a lot of schools, for example, some kids might just come in any colour at all. But the point I'm making is that, like, it's a non-uniform day. It's a distraction, really, in the school. And a lot of teachers will tell you, like, that, you know, pupils are never as focused in school on a non-uniform day. And, you know, like, the first and foremost job of teachers and pupils should be to focus on the curriculum and get the content delivered to the pupils. We've enough to be doing with the time we have given to us to get the actual curriculum delivered.
And did you opt to do this BelongTo training that came into your
I declined to do it.
And why did you decline to do that?
I had concerns about what was in it, and I just felt as conscientious objection as well.
Okay. And was there any follow-up for the teachers who were on the decline list for this BelongTo training?
Not that I'm aware of. I can only speak for where I work. I'm not sure about other schools, so I'm not. But I can only speak for myself, and
okay.
You know.
And in addition to the stand-up weeks that the trans activist group sponsor, the BelongTo stand-up weeks, are there any visuals in the school to continue to change the culture and the language?
Yeah, there are. I mean, teachers, for example, in schools they might get emails, and they're offered the opportunity to put an ally sticker. And an ally sticker is a little sticker with the 6 colours that they can put on the door of their classroom if they want to. Now that sounds nice, but of course, if a teacher.
So wait a minute. So teachers are asked if they want an ally sticker to stick on their classroom door to show that they're an ally for this ideology?
Yes.
And are there any words on that sticker? Does it say anything, or is it just a rainbow?
It's just a sticker with 6 colours and the word ally written across it. Now the problem with that is that there are teachers who don't want that sticker, and it's easy for students and other teachers to see what teachers they are, because most teachers in most schools usually, especially when they're a while, have a base classroom anyway. So and someone they might be the only teacher using that room anyway. So it's easy enough to identify fairly quickly what teachers don't buy into this ideology.
And the opposite of an ally is an enemy. So in the perception in the student's mind could be, if you're not an ally, you're an enemy. And an ally, they're pushing under the diversity, equity, and inclusion to create a safe school, an inclusive school. Yeah. So did you accept that sticker on your door?
No, I did not. I declined it as well, so I did. A lot of students actually aren't buying into this ideology, and from conversations I've had with students, like we've already gone through before about what's in books and all of that, but a good few students have said to me that they're fed up with stand-up week, and they've said to me that they think it's wrong, the whole ideology, and a couple of students have said to me that they think it's very wrong that men could end up in women's changing rooms, and you know, they've used stronger words than that. And look, I've never rebutted their assertions. I'd always use positive affirmation, but I do agree with them. Men should not be next to or near women's spaces. And like, you know, like a man in a woman's changing room is the equivalent of a fox in a hen house. Or alternatively, like, would you like to see maybe an older woman going into a changing room where your son is?
No. And were you consulted as a teacher in any staff meetings or surveys about whether you and the other teachers wanted these ally stickers, stand-up week, BelongTo training? Were you asked about this?
Well, you get an email, so you do. But like, you know, it's obvious enough if you don't want it who you are. And I just don't agree with that. I mean, our focus as teachers should be on delivering the curriculum. That's what we're supposed to be doing, and more we're migrating. It's been migrated away from, and that's my issue with it.
So you got an email to do the mandatory training or a compulsory training. Were teachers in any staff room meetings or one-to-ones, were you asked as a teacher if you wanted this BelongTo training in the school, the ally signs and the stand-up week?
No.
So this is being imposed on all teachers in the name of diversity.
Yes.
But if, as you said, it doesn't align with your moral conscience, do you feel that it's inclusive or perhaps even discriminatory?
Well, I would feel that it's discriminatory because, well, by their measure, if you're not being inclusive, you're excluding yourself. I mean, I teach children, I teach a subject. that's what that's what it should be about, nothing else. If you want to go off with that sort of a thing, do it on their own time. But that's the way I would see it.
Okay. And in addition to BelongTo, the trans activist youth group, are there any other trans activist groups and NGOs in Ireland who have sent anything to you through the post or email or
yeah, we did receive before some documentation, I think, from TENI, so we did. And to be honest with you, I didn't really look at it.
And that's TENI as in the Trans Equality Network Ireland?
Yes, transforming the classroom.
Transforming the classroom.
Yeah, whatever that's about, you know.
Okay. And you mentioned you were a member of the Teachers Union of Ireland,
Yes.
TUI, and you were on the executive committee.
Yes.
We had a recent whistleblower, Stephen Lynch, who talked about the TUI has really been hijacked and pushing the political ideologies and really hijacked by people with extreme views. Can you talk about what you may have seen from TUI and if it's changed over the years since you were on the executive committee?
Yeah, well, I was on the executive committee from 2014 to 2016, and we pay our 30p or whatever 30 to 40 euro subscription a month. I believe that the union have expanded into extracurricular activity, and I believe that the focus of the union should be to protect and improve the terms and conditions of their paying membership.
Mm-hmm. And Stephen Lynch, the whistleblower, said that it's become very politicized in the union. He mentioned even at the conferences there were people at the door handing out Communist Party leaflets and such. I went onto the website of the TUI and they were urging members to march in a political march to stand in solidarity with Palestine. And we also had a parent complain to us that there were moments of silence for Palestine. Now, we have a very diverse community in Ireland. Some people would be on one side of the conflict and some on the other. Have you seen anything from TUI in relation to these political events or pushing them onto teachers?
Well, everything that you have mentioned, and I mean, like, I mean, teachers, I mean, I would be concerned about unions going out marching for any political thing, because a union is supposed to be apolitical. I'm not naive enough to know. I know that certain political parties in every country in the world are affiliated with unions anyway. But like, if teachers want, like, asking teachers to partake in things in schools, I don't agree with this, because the union is supposed to represent everybody across the political divide. I mean, there are schools, and you do see in some schools, and you see sometimes in classrooms, where people might have flags up or whatever for Ukraine or Palestine or whatever, and I don't think that should be happening in schools, because first of all, we're a neutral country. But I think that, as I said, like, the union should be focusing on protecting the terms and conditions. If people want to march, if teachers want to march, by all means do it as an individual in your own right, but I don't think the union should be doing that. And especially, as you said, you can have kids from one country and another country in a classroom. And I mean, like, we get a lot of, you know, for foreign direct investment into the country as well. And I'd be concerned that we could lose some of that.
Yeah, it seems clear, Seamus, that the school is subverting the moral beliefs of teachers like yourself, students, as you mentioned,
Yes.
but also of the family beliefs,
Yes.
such as the fact that there are only two sexes. What else do you see as an overreach whereby maybe the state is trying to take over the role of mother and father?
Yeah, well, as you said there, Jan, like, pupils and even indeed teachers are being told what to think, not how to think. But I would feel that, for example, there are a lot of diagnoses now being given to pupils, and I think that there are too many of them. And I'll qualify what I say. A lot of students have ADHD and autism, and a lot of students very genuinely have that. But I think that some I've been teaching pupils for a good few years who have been given diagnoses, and I really don't think that they needed any diagnosis. And if I may give an example, I mean, if you take, for example, Albert Einstein, the great scientist, it was well known that when he was in school, when teachers would ask him a question, he would repeat the question to himself before he'd give the answer back. Now, if Albert Einstein was around today, he'd probably be given some diagnosis. And I think what that's leading to is the way I look at it is, a lot of people that are very talented and come up with ideas or think critically, they always do things differently anyway. They think differently, they might act differently, some people might consider, as they said in the olden days, maybe they might be a little bit quirky, but because of the fact that we're trying that kids now at a young age, I think what's happening is it's stifling their creativity. And I mean, I've often seen myself in a classroom when you show kids how to do something, I would show them one way and I'd always tell them there's more than one way, but you'll often see kids go off and they'll do things their own way. They'll still arrive at the right place with the answer. And I think that because of overdiagnosis, and I always come back to saying there are kids that genuinely have conditions, and Professor Patricia Casey spoke about this recently. I think you might have seen her speaking at that, and she spoke at an event recently, and she's one of the most respected people in that field, and she spoke about the fact that there's an awful lot more, that there are far too many diagnoses being done today than need to be done.
Yeah,
and it's not fair on the kids that genuinely need diagnosis.
Yeah, and it's back to the transgender ideology being pushed in school, teaching children that they can be a boy, girl, neither, or both, and question if they're born in the right body, and putting them in a box. So you might have a...
Well, when I think there, Jana, like that, I mean, like, one of the things that people say about this ideology is that they say that people are, when I hear people who don't agree with this ideology, you often hear them say, well, people are entitled to believe whatever they like. Well, actually, that's not true. I mean, I don't have the right to believe that you're a woman because that's a fact. I have to accept that fact, and by extension of that fact, I'm not allowed into your bathroom area, into your changing room, into your sport. And to tell a young child something like that is an absolute absurdity. And those that get you to believe absurdities will later get you to commit atrocities. And we've already, not just in Ireland, but in a lot of different countries, we've already had criminal acts committed against women in their own space by men who have been in that space. And I don't use this phrase biological men either. They're just men. Men should not be in women's space. But when children are being told this, like, a lot of children, I think a lot of credit needs to be given to young people today. A lot of them don't accept this ideology. And they're saying it to me, and they're saying it to other teachers as well, probably.
And to your point, if children aren't allowed to be unique, be themselves, figure things out their own way, it is teaching, as you said, teaching them what to think, not how to think. And part of the learning journey is for children to figure things out and use their thinking along the way, even if it's different. So if every child is put into this certain box, you're different, you're ADHD, you're autistic, you're this, you're that, or you're born in the wrong body, they're not going to develop into the best version of themselves. And if everyone is the same, no one is special or unique.
Well, I mean, Jana, like, every one of us learns from our mistakes. We've all made mistakes. And, there's an old saying, the man that never made a mistake never made anything. And children learn from their mistakes as well. And this is how they get creative. And it's stifling their creativity. And it means that you're not going to get the most talented people, because you have to let kids be themselves, and you'll be very surprised with the results you come up with. And I see it all of the time. So I'm still amazed looking, in the number of years I've done the job, I'm still amazed looking at the way kids can still come up with fantastic ideas, and they often come up with shortcuts that even I didn't think of. But they'll only do that when they're left alone and when they're left to with themselves.
Yeah, and back to the point we had about the state stepping in to take over the role of mother, father. We know that the state buys the books get locked up at school, phones get locked up, kids can't record or take pictures of the material. There's class contracts in some of the books where kids are asked to sign a class contract, and on the NCCA document it says what happens in the classroom stays in the classroom. So there's a clear subversion of parental rights. But from the parent-teacher meetings that you have with parents every year, do you think parents are aware of what's happening where the curriculum, the culture, and the language has been, as you said, hijacked? Are parents aware of this?
Well, I think, Jan, like, and I've been meeting parents for years, and I would say 99% of the parents, nearly 100%, they want what's best for their kids. And I feel sorry for parents, because, like, parents have to work very hard these days to make ends meet, and they trust the school to do what's best for their kids. And some parents are aware, some parents aren't. That's probably as much.
And the ones that are aware, do you think they understand that the significance of these changes on their child's well-being, development, but also ability to thrive when they get out of school and be a critical thinker? Are they aware of how significant the changes are?
Probably not yet, and probably part of the reason for that is that the changes haven't been in as long. I can start to see this coming in slowly, do you know. I mean, one thing I notice, for example, is if you look at the quality of the books that are written these days, a lot of the books that are written these days for schools are very badly written. And like I know that when I started teaching, when you looked through the textbooks that we used to use, you could read a whole book, you'd never find a mistake in it. A lot of books today, that they're badly written, but there's also even things like drawings are not done properly. Little things that should be done right. The quality of what's in the books, and I do think myself that, you know, when you get things for free, they're never going. I mean, the old Chinese proverb, something good not free, something free not good. And I just, you know, if you look at a lot of the books today, they're of a very, very low quality. And, you know, even students, even young students have said to me that the books are not great. And some students have even told me that their parents, who might have, say, in my case, an engineering background or whatever, that they've said to their son or daughter that book is terrible.
Yeah.
Now, I can vary what I use in the classroom as well, do you know?
And you mentioned the quality of the books, and there's drawings wrong and typos, but the content is also quite alarming. You mentioned that you do teach the civic, social, political education. From the book that you teach from for that subject, can you talk about anything in the book that might also contradict the moral conscience of teachers or students or parents?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, like the ideologies that are being pushed in schools now are in these books. And there's also things like, you know, they're also looking at organizations that are now being looked at for terrorism. I mean, like if you look at BLM or some of these now are being actually looked at in other countries to see, you know, like what they're involved in.
And what else would be in the CSPE book? There's the BLM you mentioned. What other ideologies would be in the pages of, say, the Make a Difference CSPE book?
Well, you'd have the ideologies that BelongTo are proposing in the schools. You have, they also mention things like white supremacy. They mention climate, all of that type of stuff. And like, you know, I think there's one page in the book, you know, where there's a kind of telling you what information is and disinformation and all of that. It's not for a book to tell you what's that. I mean, for example, if you read old history books, one of the things that you'll often see written at the end is they'll often have a preface or whatever, and the author will often say that he understands it, or he or she understands it when they read this, that when you read this book, you may disagree with some of what's in it, and the author understands fully that absolute historical fact can never be fully established. So like, books should just be there to teach you, just to give you the information as best. Like when I learned, for example, history in school, like you were given a generally balanced view. If you read about a war between two countries, you'd be given a balanced view, but now you would feel in books you're being told what to think instead of how to think.
Yeah. And how can we resolve this? How can we get back to a place where classrooms are a place where children can go to learn, not be politically indoctrinated by activists who have taken over? How do we get back to normality and a good education?
Well, I think, you know, I mean, I suppose, like, I think we just need to get back to basics, really. So I think we need to focus more on, I think, first of all, we need to give more time to subjects. I mean, you know, like well-being and all of this have been given extra time they've been given more time on the school timetable every year. And, you know, a lot of kids aren't benefiting from it, but it's taking away from other subjects.
Have you seen subjects that you teach, any time on that particular subject, like engineering, reduced due to all of this well-being, political education?
It depends on the school you're in, and it depends on the subjects, and there's always things about allocations and certain subjects and numbers and all of that. But some subjects are suffering because of the time that goes into well-being, and I think, especially like with, you know, like, I mean, well, with all subjects, and, you know, all subjects need their time, and you can't put one subject above another and say that should be.
And have your hours on a specific subject been reduced at all?
Well, I know that, say, for example, I would have maybe sometimes had 3 hours with junior cert, and now it's down to 2. So I think, you know, like I prefer, you know, because kids need the time, so they do, like, you know.
So they're losing valuable core subjects being replaced with the civic, political.
Yeah, well, if they're not losing a subject maybe in a school, they might be losing the time. in the subject, which is important, like, because, you see, you have to remember too, in every subject, like, there's a wide variety of, across the classroom, there's a lot, all kids will have different ranges of abilities. You have to try to cater for everybody.
So it's very clear, Seamus, that there's things being imposed on teachers and students against the wishes of mothers and fathers. The school and the state has an overreach.
Yes.
How do we get back to a normal functioning education system where our children can go to learn?
Well, I think there has to be a resistance against it, Jana. And I give examples of where there has been resistance. Police, in cases, for example, in Britain, there was a ruling recently in court that a woman is born, not worn. Some police forces now have resisted being told to call criminals by their preferred pronouns. If you look at America, they've abolished DEI in the public sector hiring. If a teacher tells a pupil that they're born in the wrong body, they could face criminal prosecution. Men are not allowed into women's spaces. It has been written into the Constitution in America that there are two sexes, male and female, and there has been pushback in other areas as well. Companies that sell puberty blockers are now being followed up on, and we don't know what will come of that, but it has been announced. So I think people need to sort of be writing letters. They need to be getting onto their school principals, politicians, etc. And if they can maybe make it an election issue. And because I think where there has been pushback, or where they see that people don't want this, that there have been results achieved.
That's a really good point, and I think pushback and resistance are really the key things to do, because it's been years where parents have been pushing back in the thousands, but Ireland, unlike other countries, Ireland is pushing this ahead really, really far. You talked about the footprints in the hall, the ally stickers, the BelongTo coming in, TENI emailing you guides about new glossary of terms and such. So in Ireland, because the state is pushing it really hard, I think that your point about mothers and fathers need to really push back even harder, because we've seen the success of that in other countries.
Yes.
There's a real overwhelming silence amongst teachers. Why do you think there's silence? Is it out of fear? Is there an underlying threat why teachers aren't speaking up and pushing back on this?
I don't. Maybe there's silence from some teachers, Jenna. I think a lot of teachers haven't gone along with it. They just won't do it. A lot of teachers have declined to do the training. A lot of teachers just want to get on with their job, and they've just been quietly not doing it. And I think there's more teachers doing that than you think. I mean, I myself declined to do the training. I'm not going to push. I don't agree with pushing an ideology in a classroom. My job is to teach the subject that's on the curriculum. And I think more teachers than we might think have not been buying into this and have not been doing it. There might be silence from some teachers, but then again, some teachers maybe are happy to do it. But I think that from what I gather, talking to pupils, and what I would say is, Jana, I notice with some pupils now, some of them seem to be a bit irked by this subject. I haven't seen that as much before. Pupils might sit in a class where there's a subject they may not particularly like, but they'll just sit through it. But when pupils are saying to you that they don't agree with what's being taught or something like that, I think they need to be heard. I think because students don't really have a voice in all of this, but it's up to teachers themselves too. I can only speak for myself. Because and we just have to do what we're doing. We just sort of say we're not interested in being part of this.
Yeah, and as parents, we hand our children over every day to the school. The school acts in loco parentis, and we trust the teachers, and there's so many good teachers out there. So is there anything you'd like to ask of your fellow teachers?
You did mention that in the classrooms you have things like, class contracts and that type of a thing. Everything that you learn in a classroom has to be there to, that every parent is entitled to see what every mum and dad. I don't like using the word parent really, because it's a kind of a government word, if you like. Every mum and dad or guardian or whoever, is entrusted with the care of the child, is entitled to see and know. Because a lot of the time, for example, when children go home, they often do their homework with their mum or dad, and that's something that's very nice as well. So I think that I think that's what we need to do there.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you again for coming forward to talk about what's happening behind the school gates in the classroom, because as we know, the books are locked away and those controversial books don't make it home. So we really rely on teachers like you, Seamus, to say no to the ideology, to stand firm, to protect children, but also to let all of the mothers and fathers out there know what's happening. So we're really grateful you came forward, and hopefully this inspires more and more teachers to speak up.
Speaking as men, thank you very much.
Remember, children only get one shot at childhood. It is a sacred duty of every mother, father, and educator to protect our children from political capture, indoctrination, and institutional inertia. If you oppose the content in the classroom that you heard about today, visit naturalwomenscouncil.com under the Connect Ed campaign for a toolkit and letter to empower you to take action so you can protect your child.